Welcome again to the second module of the training on co-creative practices developed by the University of Groningen. In the previous module, we focused on how to structure and plan co-creation sessions and looked at some best practices to make them effective. Now, we're taking the next step. Because once a session is done, the real challenge begins. What do we actually do with all the ideas and inputs we've collected? That's where this module comes in. We'll explore how to synthesize and report outcomes so they're clear, structured, and useful, both for us and for everyone we're working with. And just as importantly, we'll look at how to evaluate the co-creation process itself, gathering feedback that helps us learn, improve, and make each round of co-creation more effective. So, think of this module as the bridge, moving from planning and running sessions to making sure the results actually create impact and continuity. By the end of this module, you'll have achieved two objectives. You'll understand how to synthesize and report co-creation outcomes clearly and in a structured way, so they can stand alone and be reused. You understand the importance of evaluating and improving the co-creation process by applying feedback mechanisms that capture participants' perspectives. We will start with the first step, synthesizing and sharing outcomes internally. Let's talk about what happens after a co-creation session. Capturing and processing outcomes isn't just a formality. It's what makes the difference between insights that stick and insights that fade away. First, give yourself time for post-session digestion. As the person doing the reporting, don't jump in too fast. Take a little time to reflect and structure the outcomes before finalizing them. This helps you make sense of the material and avoid missing important connections. Second, process results soon after the session. When discussions are still fresh in your mind, you'll capture details more accurately. Waiting too long increases the risk of losing nuance and valuable insights. Third, follow up early with participants. Sometimes notes aren't clear, or an idea needs more context. A quick check-in can clarify things before they're forgotten. You might even go a step further and ask participants to validate your reporting. Does it reflect what they meant? Is anything missing? Is it clear? That way, they help refine the outcomes and ensure accuracy. Fourth, be aware of delays. The longer you wait, the greater the chance of information loss and reduced output quality. What seemed vivid in the moment can quickly become vague. Finally, share outcomes internally in a timely way. This makes sure everyone has access to accurate and detailed information and can build on it right away. Timely sharing keeps momentum going and strengthens trust in the process. Now that we've seen the importance of synthesis, let's talk about how to report co-creation outputs in a structured way. Once we've captured all those ideas and discussions, the next question is, how do we make sure our reporting is actually clear and useful? One thing that really helps is having a template ready. A simple structure you can use right after the session makes it much easier to capture and evaluate outputs. It also saves time and keeps everything consistent. Then, think about the final report as something that should stand on its own. Even someone who wasn't in the room should be able to read it and fully understand what happened. To do that, you'll want to include a few key elements: the purpose and scope of the session, the method you used, the seeds and rationale, why you approached it that way, the session outputs, an evaluation of the outputs, and an evaluation of the session itself. But there's much more to it than just filling in sections. Good reporting is part of the co-creation process itself, not just an afterthought. When people see their contributions clearly reflected, it builds trust and keeps them engaged. Reporting should also be transparent. It should show how you got from raw inputs to structured outputs, so participants can trace their influence. It should be accessible and clear, avoiding heavy jargon so that anyone can engage with it. And whenever possible, make it visual. Summaries, diagrams, or highlights can make the results easier to digest and share. Finally, don't think of reports as the end of the process. They should be living documents that can be revisited and built on in future sessions. So, strong reporting doesn't just capture what happened, it shows why it mattered. It makes outcomes usable, and it helps sustain the momentum of the whole co-creation journey. When we think about outputs from co-creation, it's helpful to see them not as the endpoint, but as the building blocks for what comes next. Good outputs don't just sit in a report. They should inform the next project phases. That means they can help us revise earlier work if needed and guide upcoming activities. It's also important to remember that one session rarely completes a full phase. Often, phases stretch across multiple sessions. So each session should give us something useful to carry forward, what we call intermediate outputs. These intermediate outputs don't have to be long or detailed. What matters is that they enable progress. They keep partners aligned, they support feedback collection, and they help with seeding future sessions. Even a short summary can do the job, as long as it captures the key insights we need to keep the work moving. So, outputs are not just records of what happened, they're the stepping stones that connect one session to the next. Here's an example from the HumAIne project, showing how co-creation outputs were handled. The co-creation session was held, and stakeholders with different levels of familiarity contributed. That gives us a set of raw outputs. But as you can imagine, some of it may lack clarity or relevance. The next step is to refine those outputs, polishing them for accuracy and focus. This connects to what we discussed earlier about making reporting transparent, clear, and structured. Once refined, the outputs are shared back with participants before the next session. That way, everyone comes in with a clearer picture of what was captured and where things stand. And when the follow-up session takes place, contributions improve because stakeholders are no longer rehashing unclear points. They're building on a shared foundation. So, this HumAIne example really shows how reporting and refining outputs directly support continuity across sessions and keep the co-creation process moving forward. Now that we've seen how outputs can be built on, let's shortly shift to the second part of this module, which is about evaluating co-creation activities. So, besides refining the output, it's just as important that we get feedback on the co-creation activities themselves. One way we do this is with short surveys after each phase. Nothing heavy, just a mix of quick closed questions and a few open ones to hear what people really think. We also ask, how did the co-creation help your own development? And did it bring more clarity among stakeholders? Those questions show us if the process is actually working beyond just generating ideas. Timing is key too. We try to collect feedback right after the sessions, when impressions are still fresh. And finally, we don't rely only on surveys. Short interviews, group reflections, even informal check-ins, like a quick chat afterwards, all give us extra perspectives that we might otherwise miss. That way, we're not only improving the results, but also learning from how we work together. So, in the previous step, we looked at how we collect feedback during co-creation, through surveys, interviews, reflections, and informal check-ins. But collecting feedback isn't enough on its own. The real value is in how we actually use it for improvement. One way to think about it is to treat feedback like customer satisfaction data. Just as companies rely on customer insights to refine their services, we should view co-creation feedback as critical input for making the process itself better. It's not an optional extra. It's a key driver of continuous improvement. That also means we have to show participants that their input matters. Sharing results in reports, dashboards, or simple summaries helps build trust and transparency. People want to know, was my voice heard? And we need to go a step further, closing the loop. That means pointing out clearly how feedback has led to changes. Maybe we adjusted the format of a workshop, added more time for reflection, or clarified roles. When participants see that their suggestions actually shape the process, it boosts engagement and commitment. Finally, we should always look for diverse perspectives. Experts, end users, and decision makers each notice different things. By combining these perspectives, we avoid blind spots and create improvements that work for everyone involved. So to connect it back, first, we focus on collecting feedback in the right ways. Then, we treat that feedback as essential data, share it openly, close the loop with visible changes, and draw on a variety of voices. That's how co-creation not only produces better outcomes, but also keeps evolving and getting stronger with every cycle. Before we wrap up this module, here's an example of the questions asked to evaluate a co-creation workshop within the HumAIne project. You can see how participants rated their experiences and provided comments on different aspects of the session. For example, if the workshop met the goals and expectations of participants, if the structure and content were adequate for meaningful discussion, if all topics covered in the workshop were relevant for enhancing the project activities, and if the materials provided were suitable and helpful. This approach closes the feedback loop and strengthens engagement for future co-creation activities. So, let's wrap up what we've learned in this module. In this module, we explored how to synthesize and report outcomes, how to use outputs as seeds for future work, and how to evaluate co-creation through feedback. By processing results promptly, reporting them clearly, and systematically gathering feedback, you ensure that co-creation is not just a one-off activity, but an ongoing, improving process that drives impact. Thank you for your attention. In the next session for Module 3, we will explore how co-creation was put into practice in the HumAIne project.